It is the bewitching hour, 3 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Before we hear the case, I'm going to read the guidelines by which we operate. This is a public hearing, and we are the Zoning Board of Adjustment for Putnam County, Florida. We operate under the authority of Articles 11 and 12 of the Land Development Code as amended. The primary responsibility of the board is to hear and decide appeals challenging final determinations made by the Planning and Development Services Department under the Land Development Code, and to hear and act upon requests for variances, special use permits, nonconforming use determinations, and preliminary development plans under the Land Development Code. Today we have a variance. A variance is relaxation of the requirements of the zoning code in a particular case where, because of unusual circumstances, a literal enforcement of our zoning code would result in undue or unnecessary hardship. The zoning code permits us to authorize variances only for height, size of structure, size of yards, and open spaces. If we grant a variance, we may impose reasonable conditions on the use of the property, which must be satisfied if the variance is to remain valid. The standards we use in deciding whether or not to grant a variance are listed in Section 45-833 of the Land Development Code. I am going to skip the section on the special use permit because we do not have one today. Okay, procedurally, we will call each case by name and number. A member of the staff will then briefly explain to us the nature of each request. We will then take any comments from the applicant or their representative, followed by any public comments concerning the request. Please direct all comments or statements to the board and not to other people in the audience. Before speaking, we will ask each person to be recognized, come forward to the lectern, and identify his or herself by name and address. After all persons wishing to speak have been heard, we will entertain a motion from the board. This motion will be voted on by board members and become our final order. Any decision made by this board can be appealed to the circuit court. However, any appeal must be filed within 30 days after the Board of Adjustment has rendered the final order which is being appealed. Are there any questions? Okay, before the first case is heard, all those wishing to speak will need to be sworn in. So will the notary please administer the oath? You're not speaking? Okay, it's up to you. All right. Okay, the first case today is Variance 22-006.
Thank you, board members. For the record, Zachary Baker, Planning and Development Services. Today is, of course, July 20th, 2022. We're hearing the residential variance case number V22-006. The applicants are Hannah Nash and Kevin Fortuna. The location for this variance request is 102 Thicket Lane in Palatka. The future land use designation is Urban Reserve, and the zoning district is Residential 1. Some background to the property. The subject parcel is a total of 0.52 acres. It's located within the Thicket replat of the Rottens recorded subdivision. The lot meets the dimensional requirements of the zoning district and has been developed with a single-family residence and accessory structures, including an in-ground pool. All existing improvements conform to the requirements of the Land Development Code. The existing pool conforms to the allowed reduced setbacks stipulated by LDC Section 45-503, subsection C7. The pool was permitted in 2006 under a previous owner, and the new owners would like to erect a screened enclosure around the existing pool. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow reduced setbacks to the rear principal building setback from 20 feet to 12 feet, equaling an 8-foot reduction. The requested reduction would allow the pool enclosure to abide by the minimum 20-inch separation requirement of the Florida Building Code for pool barriers. The barrier around the pool shall be at least 20 inches from the water's edge to prevent a young child or medically frail elderly person from immediately falling into the water. The Land Development Code does not offer any provision for enclosing a lawfully permitted in-ground pool, and the screened enclosure is required to abide by the principal building setbacks. The proposed enclosure would not attribute to an increase in impervious surfaces within the property. The proposed reduction still provides enough room to conform with the intent of building setbacks which ensure healthy, functional, safe, and attractive development, protection of natural resources, provide adequate access to parcels or lots, and avoid adverse effects on surrounding properties. This is an aerial image of the subject property. Please keep in mind that the GIS mapping system that we use is often a little bit skewed, so the pool is not directly on the property line. In fact, it's 15 foot from the rear property line and about 12 foot from the north property line. Here's a map showing the residential 1 zoning district. As you can see, it abuts a residential 2 zoning district directly east of it. Here's the map of the future land use depicting urban reserve. The wetlands map would show that there does not appear to be any jurisdictional wetlands within the property or surrounding the property. FEMA flood zone map depicts that it's entirely FEMA flood zone X, which is not a special flood hazard area. And for the purposes of conformity, I've also included a map with surrounding pools. It may be difficult for you to see, but there's a little P icon on each property within the neighborhood that has a pool, and many of those pools are enclosed with a screened enclosure as well. Here's a site plan that the applicant submitted showing a survey of the property, the setbacks of the pool, and where the screened enclosure is roughly going to end up. The variance request is the only provision in the Land Development Code to allow the property owners to enclose the existing conforming swimming pool. Staff is recommending approval of the setback reduction from 20 feet down to 12 feet with the following condition. The edge of the proposed screened enclosure shall not encroach into the rear principal setback more than 8 feet. Compliance with this requirement shall be shown conclusively on the building permit submitted for the screened enclosure and will be checked during inspections. The variance is the only way the property owners can increase the safety of the swimming pool. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Okay, all right, thank you, sir. Before we proceed, let's do a site visit roll call. Also, let's make sure that we divulge any ex parte communication when your name is called.
Earl Ballengee,
Yes.
Mark Fisher,
Yes.
Linda Osborne,
Yes.
Mary Ratliff,
Yes.
Linda Bazar,
Yes, and I did have ex parte communication.
Ron West,
Yes.
Amy Stanley.
Yes. Okay, I think at this time, the applicant has chosen not to come forward and speak to us, so I guess we will proceed with any questions that, there were no questions of staff before, so
Madam Chairman, if I may interrupt for just a moment, and this is more so directed at the member who had ex parte communication. Will that affect, if I may direct the question toward her, will that affect your judgment in this case?
No.
Okay,
okay, thank you.
that's all.
All right,
Thank you.
it is, at this time, I'm supposed to ask about people wishing to come forward and speak in favor and opposition, but there's no one in the audience that's going to come forward, so I guess we will close it to the public and open it up for board discussion and motion.
Madam Chairman, I move we approve variance 22-006 as it meets the criteria for variance as required by section 45-833 of the Putnam County Land Development Code with the condition recommended by staff and authorize the chairman to sign the final order.
We have a motion and second to approve variance 22-006. Is there any further discussion? If none, those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, motion carries 7-0. So just for your information, there is a 30-day appeal process. but I don't think anybody was too concerned about it today, so they didn't show up. But anyway, I have to notify that, let you know that. So if there's any issues, you can always work with staff and work out anything that's of importance. Okay? All right. The next thing on our agenda will be any old business? Any new business? Okay, the next thing is approval of minutes for June 15th, 2022. Has everybody had a chance to read them?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes of June 15, 2022. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, we stand adjourned.
No.
New record.
Oh, no,
New record.
it's a new record.